Greetings, my friends. Sit ye down, and hear tales of the past, told by the ancient flame. There are many tellings of these stories. This one's mine. How Thor Got His Hammer. In the early days of Asgard, when the gold of the gods was new, and their laughter still rang across the world like morning bells, there was peace amongst them. The halls shone, the mead was sweet, and no shadow had yet fallen upon the walls they had raised with toil and with trickery. But peace never lasts long where Loki walks. He had agreed to go on a trip with Thor, but had woken late. Thor, for his part, was bored of waiting for Loki, who was often late, and decided to teach him a lesson, and to leave him behind. Loki arrived at their meeting point just in time to see Thor's chariot disappear over the horizon. Loki was hurt that Thor had abandoned him, and started to slowly walk back to his palace. The air was too still, the songs too joyful, and Loki caught a glimpse of the shining hair of Sif, Thor's beautiful wife, that gleamed just a little too proudly in the sun. After many days of brooding and a fair amount of dark elven wine, Loki's jealousy turned to malice. Why should the Thunderer's wife be more radiant than the dawn itself? He mused, his grin curving like that of a serpent. Let us see what beauty she keeps when the sun no longer favours her. And so, when Sif slept, Loki crept close, silent as the mist. With a silver knife, he started to cut off Sif's golden hair. He intended to only take a little, but wrapped up in his own cleverness and mirth, he sheared her until her head shone bare as polished bone. As Loki stood back to admire his work, he bumped into a table and, not wanting to risk being caught, fled out of a nearby window. As he did, though, one of his sandals fell off. Loki looked rapidly for it in the bushes, but could not find it, and with dawn gleaming on the horizon, he was forced to abandon his search. Thor returned early that morning and found his wife weeping, her hair gone. The sky itself darkened, and the wind rose, and the ground trembled beneath his very feet. "Who has dared?" roared Thor, his voice scattering the very clouds. Rage like this had never been seen before by god or giant or man. Every god in Asgard heard his cry and trembled, for the Thunderer, even in a good mood, was not someone you wanted to be at odds with. There was a reason why some called him the Smiter. Thor saw the open window and leapt out. He spotted a shoe in the bush and instantly recognized it as Loki's, as he was the only god to stitch his boots with golden thread rather than the normal leather. Thor, who was well acquainted with Loki's antics, knew the place he would flee. He found him at last beside a river in a realm between worlds. Loki attempted to escape by transforming into a fish and swimming away, but Thor, still fit to bursting with rage, waded straight into the river and grabbed the fish out of the water with his bare hands. "Peace, red-bearded one," cried Loki, transforming back. "Would I truly harm your lady's beauty forever? Nay, brother, as you well know, I meant only mischief. I shall fix what I have marred." Now, whilst Thor was on the point of feeding Loki his own legs, he did love his wife, and if there was a chance that this slime he was holding could rectify things, he was willing to take that chance. "Fix it," growled Thor, "or I will break every bone in your cunning body and feed what is left of you to the wolves." And so Loki, still trembling slightly, though he hid it well, hastened to the dark realm below Midgard, to the land of the dwarves and the master smiths who could shape wonders from the heart of the earth. He entered their forges, where sparks fell like stars and hammers rang louder than war. There he found the sons of Ivaldi, dwarves of ancient craft. "O great smiths," said Loki with honeyed words, "you owe me a debt, and I have come to collect. I have come with a task worthy of your name. Fashion for me a head of hair finer than silk, spun from pure gold, that it may grow upon the head of a goddess as if it was her own." The dwarves laughed, for they did love a challenge. "We shall make it so fair that it will gleam brighter than the sun," said the eldest amongst them. "And not only that," said Loki rather slyly, "but let us see what other treasures your skills might craft, for the gods of Asgard may reward you richly." So they set to work. The forges burned with white flame, and from those fires the sons of Ivaldi brought forth 3 wondrous marvels. Firstly, the golden hair, fine as sunlight, and shone brighter than they had ever promised. Second, a ship named Skidbarnir, which could hold all the gods, yet would fold small enough to fit into one's very pocket. The third, a mighty spear called Gungnir, straight and true, that would never miss its mark when thrown. When their work was done, Loki laughed with delight. But, as always, he was not done stirring trouble. For another pair of dwarves, Brock and Sindri, toiled nearby, rivals to the sons of Ivaldi. And Loki's mischief whispered to him again. "Why not a wager?" he thought. "Let them prove whose craft is greatest, and I shall make the gods my judges. Plenty of presents, and that should buy me some favour for some time." So he approached Brock and Sindri, and with a smile that promised nothing but ruin, said, "The sons of Ivaldi have forged wonders beyond compare. But you, perhaps, some say, are better. Perhaps, perhaps not. I will bet my head that there is no way you can outshine what they have made for me." As soon as the words left his mouth, Loki regretted them. For amongst dwarves, betting is taken rather seriously, and the fact that Loki had just wagered his head, well, the dwarves would certainly be looking to collect if he lost. Sindri turned to his brother. "Stoke the forge, Brock. Let us call upon the might of the deep earth. If we win this wager, Loki's cunning tongue shall trouble us no more, and shall make a fine decoration." Brock took the huge bellows, and the forge roared, and the air grew thick with heat. Sindri began to work, placing a raw boar hide upon the anvil, and said, "Blow steady, brother. If you falter, the spell will fail." Then, speaking words of craft that none but the dwarves knew, Sindri began to forge. Fearing for his head, Loki slinked back into the shadows, and the dwarves were concentrating so hard on their task that they hadn't realised that soon Loki had vanished, for he had changed shape once more, but this time into a large biting fly that came buzzing nearer and nearer. He landed on Brock's dominant bellows hand and bit and stung with a fury. But the dwarf did not falter. From the forge, Sindri drew a huge living golden boar, Galinbasti, whose bristles shone with light, so he could race through night or shadow, lighting all paths before him. Sindri laid new materials, a lump of gleaming red metal, into a solid gold crucible, and again told Brock to blow steady on the bellows and to keep the heat as constant as possible. Loki, now desperate, stung Brock on the neck. He bled, but he did not stop. From the forge, Sindri drew forth a wondrous ring, Draupnir, from which 8 new rings would drop every 9th night, a symbol of endless wealth. Sindri placed a final piece into the great forge, a square of iron, dull and lifeless. "Now hold strong," he said, "for this shall be the mightiest of all gifts." Loki returned as the fly, and, in a final act of desperation, bit poor Brock right in the eye. As stubborn a dwarf as Brock was, this was more than he could bear. He lifted his hand for an instant to strike at his tormentor, but it was just enough. The forge's fire dimmed for a heartbeat, and when Sindri drew forth the last creation, its handle was shorter than he had meant it to be. Still, it was a marvel. The hammer shone with the dim glow of thunderclouds before the storm. Mjölnir was born. Loki emerged from the shadows. "All finished, are we?" he cackled. My, Brock, that eye looks nasty. You should really be more careful in a place like this." Brock glowered at Loki, but Sindri jumped in. "Let us go to Asgard and have the gods judge which work is finest." And Loki, though afraid, could not refuse, for he knew his fate hung upon that decision. So they came before Odin, Thor, Freya, and many other gods, and the gifts were laid out in the high hall. Loki went first, presenting the treasures of the sons of Ivaldi. To Odin, the spear Gungnir that never missed its mark. Odin weighed the spear in his hand and was most pleased. To Sif, the golden hair which clung to her head, perhaps fairer than before. It did little for the look on Sif's face. And finally to Freya, the ship Skidbarnir, which could sail anywhere the wind could reach and fold into a pouch when not needed. Freya eyed his gift carefully, but could find not a single fault with it. Then Brock stepped forward with the work of Sindri and he. To Freya he gave Galinbarsti, the boar that would carry him through land and night. To Odin, Draupnir, the ring of endless bounty. And to Thor, the final gift, the hammer Mjölnir. "It will never fail you," said Sindri. "It will strike whatever you aim at and return to your hand. No weapon under heaven or earth shall equal its might. The short handle means you must wield it one-handed, though that does mean you can string it to your belt rather than your back." Loki was furious that these cunning dwarves had turned his little mistake into a positive feature. Thor took the hammer, felt its weight, and swung it just once. Thunder crackled across the sky, and the walls of Asgard themselves shook. The gods cried out in wonder, and Odin himself declared, "No gift could guard the heavens more surely than this. The hammer Mjölnir shall be the greatest of all these great treasures. The dwarves, Brock and Sindri, have won." Loki paled, for he remembered the wager. His head. Brock grinned. "Come then, trickster. A promise is a promise." Loki laughed nervously. "Aye, it is. But I promised my head, and not my neck. You may not harm that." "What about half your head, then?" said Sindri. "Say the top half." "Our deal was the whole thing," countered Loki. "And if you do not want that, then you must forfeit the whole prize." The dwarves and Loki argued bitterly backwards and forwards, and in the end, the dwarves, seething, were forced to retreat. Thor, though, impressed with his new weapon, and still furious with Loki, felt he owed something to the dwarves, and if they couldn't have something material, he could perhaps at least offer them satisfaction. Thor still had Loki's own shoe from the bush, and so gave it to the dwarves. Their eyes met, and they understood. The dwarves unpicked the golden lace that had given Loki away in the first place, and asked one final time to review the head they must forfeit. Full of smugness, Loki agreed, smiling for the dwarves. With one quick motion and a little hint of magic, Sindri sewed Loki's lips together with his own boot stitching, much to the amusement of the rest of the gods. It took Loki months to unpick the lace, and so the trickster learned silence, though not for long. From that day, Thor bore Mjölnir wherever he went. With it he guarded gods and men alike, and his blows rang out like the heartbeat of the storm. And the dwarves, deep in their forges, still tell of how their craft once made the weapon that holds back the ruin of the world, but even more impressively, made Loki, the god of mischief, cease talking, if even for a short while. And with that, my friends, I grow weary, and so I bid you good night.